I'm working on this, guys. I'm trying to get all this back up and going here. So just give me a moment, and we'll have her. We'll have her. Well, my computer crashed. Imagine that. Nope. Do this. Paste. All right. So if I've got this all correct and had to restart absolutely everything, we should be live. I'm thinking. So we're gonna give this a shot. If you're out there, give me a shout. Let me know if we're back online. So, uh, wow, that was fun. Actually, really, that was not very fun. So I'll double check this here and see what's the dealio. Part two. Yep, looks like we're up. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. If you're joining us again live, I do appreciate that quite a bit. I apologize about the craziness, but hey, it happens. I don't know how to get around that. I'm just really appreciative that Brent called in, and hey, we had a great conversation while my computer was um, you know booting back up. So this message comes on my computer and it says uh, something occurred. I don't know what it said. A problem occurred with your device. We are restarting your system. I just want to know who the we is. That's a little scary. So anyway, here's what I want to do. Again, thank you so much for coming back and checking out the rest of this, because this is going to be really the crux of the whole topic. So maybe there's a way I don't know. Maybe there's a way I can blend the two videos, but right now I'm just going to go ahead and do this, and I'll figure it out later. So the preterist is always condemned by the futurist by marriage. Now, I'll have to say this, or not by marriage, but about marriage. And they want to say, oh, well, you preterists shouldn't be getting married. Well, thank you for being so smart and telling us everything about the Bible. First off, I have to say this, okay? When the futurist looks at the preterist and tells us that we shouldn't be getting married, they're imposing upon us their failed understanding of the scriptures. Wow, that looks like it's going to do the exact same thing again. I hope not. If it does, I don't know. So I'll just deal with it if it does. So I apologize if I get kicked off here again. So I don't know. Weird things have been happening. Get ready for the crash. Everybody's going to crash. There'll be no food, no gas, no heating, nothing. No computer services, no way to communicate. So this is just the beginning. So I'm just saying. Now, they condemn us based upon their misunderstanding of the scriptures. Another thing they want to do is say, well, you shouldn't be taking the Lord's Supper because you stop communing with the Lord when He comes. Do they even really understand what they're saying? That's crazy. And of course, nobody actually believes that. But all it does and all it's meant to do is just scare people away from listening to our message. So that's one of the reasons I block people. I just got to the point where if that's what they want to do, fine. Get your own program and do that. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep preaching. So let's talk about this from Matthew chapter 22. So I gave you the context earlier, so I have to go through this again probably. But so I gave you the context earlier, and let me do this right there. And since I still have this up, let's look at it. So the context for Matthew chapter 22 is about a marriage. It's about a wedding. And it's about a wedding that takes place when the people who were invited to the wedding don't come. Then those who weren't invited originally were invited, and then they came. And then others came in later and not prepared, not invited, whatever the case might be. And they were cast into outer darkness, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now this all happens at the time when the city is destroyed by fire. Is there any question, and I know there are a lot of people say, oh no, this is not at all talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay, if that's how you want to see it, you go right ahead, but try to fit it in otherwise. You're going to have a city being destroyed by fire, and the only city that makes sense to be destroyed by fire is the city of the people who were invited and rejected the bridegroom, which would be Jerusalem, which is, i.e., short for Israel, the Jews, however you want to put this. So that's the context. So you've got this going on. Now, on that day, here in verse 23, it says, some Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and questioned him, saying, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother as next of kin shall marry his wife and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us, and the first married and died, having no children. He left his wife to his brother. It was the same also with the second brother, the third down to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her in marriage. Now, I got a thing or two I want to point out about what we have just looked at here. First off, these Sadducees say that there is no resurrection. Now, in the futurist mind, in their way of thinking, that these Sadducees are saying, well, there's not going to be a resurrection, period. That is not what they taught, I'm convinced. I'm convinced that's not what they believed. You see, they're doing the same thing with the Sadducees that they do with us today. They're imposing upon them their beliefs and how they understand scriptures. So, when the Sadducees did not believe in a resurrection, let's really examine this, and then I'll give you a couple ideas about some things that I have ideas about. I'll clue you into a couple of my ideas anyway. So, the Sadducees were Jews. They served in the temple. They had responsibilities, so forth, you name it. So they were different a little bit in their eschatology, but not so different. Okay? This begs the question, well, what kind of resurrection, what resurrection are they talking about? What Norm did in his video is he wanted to impose upon us his belief of resurrection. And then say, well, you can't answer this satisfactorily. Well, of course we can't answer this satisfactorily for Norm Fields, because it would never be satisfactory to him, no matter what we say. The only satisfactory answer to him would be if we said, oh, well, we agree with you now. We're going to go back to being futurists. That's the only satisfactory answer that he's looking for. Well, let me give you the answer from this. Norm also said that this is not talking about the levirate marriage. That's what Norm said. He's not the only one that says this. Okay, what is the levirate marriage? Well, the levirate marriage from Deuteronomy chapter 25 is teaching that when a man dies and his wife bore no children to him during their marriage, then she is to go to his brother and raise up children for him. Okay, that's the levirate marriage. The reason that was taking place is so that the heirs would have right to the land promise and so forth that we see, if you're not familiar with that, the Abrahamic promise and so forth. So that's why they did this. So what they were doing with Jesus was, now follow this, they did not believe in a resurrection. They said, well, what happens to this woman in the resurrection? Okay. What resurrection were they referring to? The Sadducees served in the temple. They had all these responsibilities. They were Jews, but they didn't believe in a resurrection. They had to believe in a resurrection. In Ezekiel chapter 37, the resurrection is outlined here. Okay, so let me show you this. Maybe I'll pull it up. I'll just start a new one. Let's see, 37. Here we go. The Valley of the Dry Bones. So in Ezekiel 37, we see this. Whoops, wrong one. So you have, this is Ezekiel and his vision, prophecy. Okay, he says, the hand of the Lord was upon me. He brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and he set me down in the middle of the valley. And it was full of bones. He had me pass among them all around, and behold, there were very many on the surface of the valley, and behold, they were very dry. He said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, Lord God, you know yourself. Yahweh, you know yourself. Again he said to me, prophesy over these bones, and say to them, you dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord God says to these bones. Behold, I'm going to make breath enter you so that you may come to life. I will attach tendons to you, make flesh grow back on you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you so that you may come to life, and you will know that I am the Lord. Now, so here we read this, and this is the context of the belief of the Sadducees. They were Jews. All Jews believed in a resurrection. Every single one of them. This was their thing. Now, the reason this was their thing is because when Messiah would come, many of them believed that Messiah would come, he would set up an earthly kingdom, and then he would start ruling and reigning. Now, here's where this gets interesting. According to some sources that I've read, Jewish Encyclopedia, a few other things that you can find online, you can just Google search it and you'll see. Some have said, based on some old writings, ancient, I guess, in some of them, that the Sadducees believed in a resurrection. They just didn't believe that it would be a physical resurrection. They didn't believe that the dead people would come out of Sheol and join them in their conquest when Messiah would come to the earth and conquer the world. They believed if you died, you went to Sheol, and there you waited until the resurrection would take place. Until the time when Sheol would be destroyed, until the time when Messiah would come. Okay, so there's too many Bible passages, Old Testament Bible passages, Old Covenant passages, Torah passages, Tanakh passages, okay? There's too many passages in what is known by so many as the Old Testament to illustrate that Sheol is destroyed at the coming of Messiah. So they knew that. It's what the Sadducees were teaching, according to some sources, that, and this is kind of sketchy. I don't think there's anything really definitive on this, but we can get a pretty good picture from scriptures. So they didn't believe that there would be a physical resurrection, and that they would be, the people living when Messiah came would not be joined by all the dead people. So in essence, if that's true, I know someone will make a soundbite out of this, but whatever, that's on them if they want to be dishonest. In essence, the Sadducees were kind of seeing things, not wholly, but kind of seeing things the right way. Now, let me illustrate something here. I thought you were looking at, I never transitioned that. Look at John chapter 12. In John 12, this is how the people of Jesus' day viewed Messiah. The Jews of Jesus' day that were living while Jesus was alive, doing his messianic work. This is how they felt about Messiah. In verse 27 of John 12, Jesus says, my soul has become troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then he goes on to explain that he has to die. Then the crowd is saying, whoa, wait a minute. Verse 33, but he was saying to indicate the kind of death by which he was going to die. So the crowd answers in verse 34, John 12, we have heard out of the law, so they're quoting the law, their understanding of the law. We've heard out of the law that the Christ is to remain forever. And how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? So their understanding was when Messiah came physically in his incarnation, as was prophesied in the old law, so they got that right, that he would remain forever. He would never die. That's the context. Well, Messiah's not going to die. Now, where does it teach that? Isaiah chapter 24 and 25 teaches clearly, this is our God for whom we have waited. He left and he comes back. He comes back at the time that the covering is ripped off of Sheol. Sheol being opened, Hades being opened, and the souls in there being dealt with. The righteous to life, the unrighteous to perish. Now, that's how by the way, this is one of the biggest reasons that Norm says, well, you can't answer this. And he really chastised Holger for going on for 2 hours talking about the levirate marriage. If you don't understand the levirate marriage, Norm, we have to take 2 hours to explain it to you, and then you still don't get it because you refuse to see. And so many refuse to see plain and simple truth. Got it? Plain, simple truth. So, the resurrection that was foretold in the Old Testament was foremost on the mind of the Jews. All Jews. Paul was a Pharisee. Paul said, hey, I am teaching nothing that is, say this right here. I'm teaching nothing but that can be found in the law. I'm teaching the law and the prophets. I'm not contradicting them. He also says that the resurrection is about to take place. Get that one. I know that's a tough one for people to actually get. But listen to this. So here you have Paul, and he's making his defense before Agrippa. This is Acts 26, by the way. And Paul says in about verse 5, he says, I lived as a Pharisee according to the strictest sect of our religion. And now I am standing trial for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers. What's the hope? What's the promise? The promise to which our 12 tribes hope to attain. What is it? As they earnestly serve God night and day. And for this hope, O king, I am being accused by the Jews. What's the hope? Why is it considered incredible among you people if God does raise the dead? Their hope was in resurrection. Israel's hope was in resurrection. When? When Messiah would come. Is there any question whether they understood it from their lifetime forward or not, but from their lifetime backward to the beginning of their nation, to the creation of their nation, right? The Abrahamic promise. Is there any question that they knew when Messiah came, at that time when he comes, the resurrection is going to take place? They didn't understand all the ins and outs of it, but they understood that it would happen at the time Messiah comes to the earth. So I wonder why Jesus taught that resurrection would take place in their lifetime. Because that's what was taught under the old law, under Tanakh, under Torah. Why is it considered incredible among you people if God does raise the dead? That's Acts chapter 26 and verse 8. But notice what he says here. By the time you get to verse 22, he says, so having obtained help from God, I stand to this day testifying both to the small and the great, stating nothing but what the prophets and Moses said was about to take place. It's imminent. It's coming. He says from his standpoint, this is about to take place. Let me keep reading. That the Christ was to suffer, and that by reason of his resurrection from the dead, he would be the first to proclaim light both to the Jewish people and to the Gentiles. When were all of these events to take place? When Messiah comes. It was prophesied. So what was their understanding of resurrection? It was to happen in their lifetime. Now, let's go back to this idea of the wedding feast. Not the wedding feast, the wedding marriage question of the Sadducees. So, since I've spent my obligatory 2 hours talking about some background information, let's get on to answering this. But I need a drink first. Oh, that's good stuff. Yeah, I'm having a little bit of metal fume fever, if you've ever dealt with that. Not fun. So, I don't know. It must be from that. My throat's getting really, really dry. But anyway, now that you know everything there is to know about me, let's keep on going. So, on that same day, some Sadducees who says there's no resurrection came to Jesus and questioned him, and they said, "Hey, tell us about this. What is it? What's the deal with this? Whose wife will she be? They're all dead." Got it? Now, knowing what we know about the resurrection belief of the Sadducees, and it's sketchy, I'll give you that, but they said the scriptures teach that the Sadducees believed there would be no resurrection. And you just assume, well, no resurrection at all. No physical resurrection. They're asking this question from their perspective. If there's not going to be a physical resurrection, then whose wife is she going to be? When they're all dead. Verse 28. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife of the 7 will she be? Notice what Jesus says in verse 29. But Jesus answered and said to them, "You are mistaken." Wait a minute. You do not understand the scriptures, nor the power of God. Now, the argument that Norm would make here, or really just about any futurist, is saying, well, it is the power of God to resurrect people physically. And God has the power to bring everybody who ever lived back from the dead and reconstitute their body and stuff their soul back in the body, and then make them lift up off the ground and then take their soul right back out of that body, and who knows what's going to happen to the body. But either way, so that's what people think. Jesus answered and said to them, "You're mistaken, since you do not understand the scriptures nor the power of God." It was a trick question that these guys were asking. One, it was not sincere. It was meant to be a trick question. It was not an answerable question the way they phrased it. They phrased it saying, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Not even believing that there would be a resurrection. Look at verse 30. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. Okay, now think about this. Jesus says here, now we need to go to a couple other passages. I don't know I'm going to run out of time because this takes a lot of time to study this out. But Jesus says they're like the angels in heaven. What is an angel in heaven like? Just answer the question. They're spirit. They're not a physical body. The angels in heaven. He says, you missed that one. You're mistaken. You don't understand the scriptures. You missed it. Notice what he says in verse 31. But regarding the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Now, Norm would say, well, so you've got these God, and he has the power, and they didn't understand, and that God has the power to reconstitute people's physical bodies. And I actually heard Norm say this when I was listening to his program today. that he is not the God of the dead but of the living means that this is a physical resurrection. Listen, the living are the dead. That's the point. He is not the God of the physically dead people. These physically dead people, these spiritually dead people, are dead. Do you get that? They're dead. They were spiritually dead. They physically died. They perish. He's the God of the living. When you're physically dead but spiritually alive, God is the God of those people. They were astonished at his teaching because what was Jesus teaching? Jesus was teaching spiritual things, not physical things. Not like so many of them expected. They did, and they made the mistake, and so many of them made the mistake. I'm not saying all of them. I get that. We can't paint with that broad of a stroke. But there were a lot of people, a lot of Jews in the first century who believed that there would be a physical resurrection. What are we seeing here? Yes, actually, we are live right now. For now, anyway. So, hi, Pat, by the way, good to see you. And Bobby, thank you so much. Holger, actually, good to see you here. Who else am I missing? Scott, maybe? Thank you all for rejoining. Sorry about the computer crash earlier. So, Norm Fields is teaching that I got to check this one too. I'm not even going to look at that. I know how to deal with that one too. Oh, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. Whew. I thought I destroyed YouTube. Well, we'll leave it up to me to crash YouTube. Anyway, that was scary. Hit the wrong button. Let's get back to this. So here's the thing that they never want to do. They don't want to talk about any other situations, okay? So they just want to go to Matthew chapter 22. So let me show you something here. Let's look at Luke chapter 20. So in Luke chapter 20, right? Let me show you this. Here was Jesus' answer to the same question. This is verse 34. The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. Okay, what is that? What age was Jesus born in? Well, we know that he was born under the law of Moses. That Mosaic age, that old covenant age, that old law age, however you want to put it. Under that age, there was a law. So that when the children of Israel entered into the promised land, they could get their land. This is the same situation that I believe was being preached to the eunuch in Acts chapter 8. In the new age, in the new covenant, you get an inheritance. You're not left out. And that would have been great news to the eunuch. But when is this new age? This new age happens when the old age dies. So remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Listen to this. Here's what he says. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Well, what's that have to do with the age? Let's keep reading. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. So, heaven and earth, whatever your concept of heaven and earth is here, I don't care at this point. Heaven and earth, in verse 18 of Matthew 5, will not pass away until the smallest stroke of a letter is all completely fulfilled out of the law. In other words, nothing will be left unfulfilled. When it's all fulfilled, then heaven and earth passes away. Are we still under the law? If you're under one part of it, you're under all of it. You're a debtor to do it all. Are we still under the law? Now let's deal with this idea of heaven and earth. If that's the case, then heaven and earth, the physical heaven and earth, did not pass away. Jesus said back in Luke chapter 20, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. Deuteronomy chapter 25 is the levirate marriage laws. They no longer apply because that age has been taken out of the way. It's been fulfilled. They no longer apply. Now, the levirate marriage laws was not about the initial marriage, but it was about the land promise. It was about the inheritance and about the physical way that that was going to be accomplished for physical Israel in a physical land. That's done and it's taken out of the way. When the resurrection takes place, the end of the law happens, it's all fulfilled. There's not going to be any levirate marriage because that's taken out of the way. There's no physical land promise to fulfill. Every man is responsible for himself. Under the old law, when the father would eat sour grapes, it would set his children's teeth on edge. They would grind their teeth. That's the illustration that's used. But under the new covenant, you're responsible for yourself. There's no land promise. There's no reason for you to rely on your father for a national inheritance. Your inheritance comes when you become a child of God. Today, I don't think Norm gets this. The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. That's the levirate marriage law. But those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. There's no levirate marriage law in the new age to come because it's taken out of the way. Heaven and earth has been destroyed. Now, I want you to understand something, okay? You and I are made out of flesh and blood. Wow, have I been on this for half an hour already? Goodness. We're made out of flesh and blood. We are a dual nature. In Hebrews, chapter 13, I think it is, Paul says, whoever wrote Hebrews, the marriage bed is honorable above all, it's undefiled. In a physical sense, the way that we are given, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, to satisfy our sexual needs that God created within us is through marriage. The way to avoid fornication, to avoid adultery, is in marriage. And it's honorable. It's dishonorable to not marry, to live together, to satisfy and gratify those created things within us outside of marriage is dishonorable. It will never be any different. When you are no longer physical, when you're like one of the angels in heaven, guess what? You don't need that marriage anymore. That's what Jesus is teaching. Now, it's multifaceted without question. So look, I'm going to keep reading. This is verse 35 of Luke 20. But those who are considered worthy to attain to that age, this is under the new covenant, and the resurrection from the dead, realize that that age happens at the resurrection of the dead. This age is the age that Jesus was living in. Are we still under the law of Moses? No. If marriage moves on physically, but the levirate marriage law disappears, then we are under the new covenant age, the last age. There's not another age after this. And you certainly couldn't find it there in verses 34 and 35. Let me pick up where I was at, verse 36. For they cannot even die anymore. They can't die anymore. Get that? Because they are like angels, and the sons of God being sons of the resurrection. Let me point something out. If you have this belief that the resurrection is going to be something that is a physical event, let me point out a couple passages to you. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul addresses this very issue, and he says that the resurrection, this is so clear. Now you watch, there'll be people, especially one guy commenting on YouTube, but there'll be many, many people who want to say, well, blah, 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 blah. You know, 1 Corinthians 15 is plain and it's clear that the resurrection is not physical, but it is spiritual. Let me read verse 42. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown a perishable body. It is raised an imperishable body. This body is perishable, if that's how you want to look at it. I don't advocate that, by the way. I view this more from a corporate aspect, but anyway. It is raised imperishable, physical, spiritual. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory, physical, spiritual. It is, I lost my place, sown in weakness, raised in power. Sown in a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is no way around this. It's a spiritual body. The resurrection is a spiritual body. Now, whoever told you and said, well, you know, it's the gospel that Paul preached to them then in the first century was that Jesus was raised physically. I'm here to tell you that Jesus could never have been raised physically if he wasn't first raised spiritually. That's the message of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. When Paul says in verse 20, but now Christ has been raised from the dead ones. The dead ones, this is plural. The first fruits of those who are asleep, plural. Those, plural, who are asleep. Now, they're asleep. They're in Hades. Okay? Jesus died, according to Romans chapter 6. He went to Hades, according to 1 Peter chapter 3, starting at, I think, verse 19. Maybe it's 18. I don't remember. But anyway, he went to Hades and he preached to those who were in prison. Peter said in Acts 2 that that's what he did. He went to Hades. It was prophesied that that's where he would go. Isaiah chapter 53, he's going to defeat death, which is Hades. That's a lot more than that, but that's a thumbnail sketch. But let me keep reading. For since by man, this is 1 Corinthians 15, verse 21. For since by a man came death, a man also came the resurrection of the dead ones. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive, but each in his own order. So he says, here's how this is going to work. Christ the first fruits. Got that? Christ was the first fruits. He was the first one to come out of Hades. He's the first fruits. It follows the 7 feasts. If you don't get the 7 feasts, you have no idea what I'm talking about. After that, those are Christ's at his coming. So the resurrection had begun. It was underway. It was taking place. Jesus was the first fruits at his death, burial, and resurrection. He defeated the grave. He defeated Hades. He came out of Sheol. He broke the death grip. Came back to his physical body. And then, several days later, ascended into heaven. No man had ever been able to do that. None. No man went to heaven before Jesus. Jesus was the first fruits. Now, then, when Christ comes, the rest who are in Hades are taken out of Hades and taken to heaven. Those who, if they were on the righteous end of it, if they're not, then they perish. They're thrown into the lake of fire. Now, let me point something out for the futurists watching. If you believe that you go to heaven when you die, you're a preterist. You might deny it, you might kick against the thorns, but it's awful hard to, because that's exactly what this is teaching. That's exactly what this is teaching. If you believe you go to heaven when you die, actually I would believe, I would add a nuance or two to that. I think we're seated with him now. If you're baptized into Christ, you're clothed in Christ, you're seated with him in the heavenly. But for the sake of argument, when you die, you go to heaven. You're a preterist. You're a preterist. You believe that Jesus came and fulfilled everything that he said he would fulfill so that heaven could be open and you could go to heaven upon death. It's a spiritual thing. So what about this marriage? The Levirate marriage comes to an end at the dawning of the new age. At the end of the old age, it comes to an end. Should people marry? You better believe it. Once that old law was taken out of the way, that Levirate marriage ended. The new law comes in, this new covenant. Let me ask you something. God created Adam and Eve in the beginning. They married. Ezekiel 38, 39. Maybe it's earlier than that. I'd have to look. Anyway, maybe it's 36. Says that at that time, when all these events are taking place and Messiah comes, this is the time when Eden is restored. If there was marriage in the garden, and it wasn't good for man to be alone, and God gave marriage then, and the new covenant is Eden restored, then get this picture, guys. For anyone who wants to say, "Oh, you preterists shouldn't be getting married," I think it's how would that go? What's that called? That's Freudian. They're just saying something that they wish, probably. I don't know. It's a Freudian slip. We don't teach that. Matter of fact, we believe in marriage and the sanctity of marriage. Because if Eden has been restored, the marriage relationship is honorable still, according to Hebrews 13. It's still honorable. And the church has an eternal purpose. The bride of Christ is the church, and it is eternal. Do you see the relationship there? The spiritual concept for a physical application? Of course, marriage is honorable. Anyway, there's lots of arguments. There's so many things I left out. If I hadn't got kicked offline earlier, I would have taken some more time to go through all of these things. But so there it is. Why do preterists marry today? Because we're not preterists. We're Christians. We're honoring God. We're honoring our husbands and our wives in marriage because that's the way it's designed. And no matter how many times Norm or anybody else wants to say, well, you preterists shouldn't be getting married, you just remember that's a Freudian slip on their part. It's probably something, I don't mean to say that, but I'm really just kind of joking about that. But maybe it's something that they really want, wish they could do. But no, not us. We believe that it's honorable and that it is eternal and that there's foreshadowing after foreshadowing and type and anti-type and all this other stuff that goes along with this. That proves to us that very concept. So I would say to Norm or anyone else who says, well, you preterists believe when Jesus comes that... see, I was actually going to talk about the Lord's Supper tonight, too. I'm out of time. When Jesus comes, you shouldn't be getting married anymore, and since he's already come, then why are you married? There's your answer. The answer is simply this. Because you don't understand marriage and the way marriage works doesn't mean that I don't understand it. So now you've got a little insight into the truth on it. So there you go. Chew on that one. Okay, so I'm going to end this. I apologize again about my computer. I don't know what the deal is with that, but we'll figure it out eventually and we'll get to it. Hey, we'll get to better things. I would love for you to go to Restoration Movement 2.0 on YouTube and subscribe. The quality might be a little better. And also, when you go to Restoration Movement 2.0 on YouTube, the videos are organized a lot better than and easier to get to and so forth than possibly on Facebook, unless you're really good at navigating Facebook, which I'm not. So check that out and certainly hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Share this video. I'm doing the very best that I can to get these where they're shareable. And what I mean by that is I will go through, and if there's any comments that are just too off color, I just get rid of those. Okay, I'm very good with I'm fine with people who disagree with me, but when you have to use foul language and unchristian behavior, no, this is not the place for it. If you want to do that, make your own channel and you use whatever language you want, but I don't have to put up with it, and neither do the rest of our listeners. And that's not Christian living. Contrary to what the people in the New World Order people and all this New Age religion people want to tell you and want to teach you, it's not okay for your speech to be peppered with expletives every other word. Peter's speech betrayed him when he spoke. You know what that means? They knew that he was a follower of Yeshua because of his speech. What does your speech say about who you are and what's in your heart? I just thought I'd do a little preacher thing there. Okay, we'll be back next week. And I certainly want you to come be a part of that and some more discussion. Tell your friends about this. Share this video. Send it to your friends and your relatives and your neighbors. And if they've got questions about what's going on with preterists, right? Then this is always one of the big questions. Maybe this will give them a little insight. I'll try to do some more on this as time progresses. And one of these days I'll sit down for about 3 hours and go through the whole thing, beginning to end, and still won't be able to do it justice. But hopefully we've made a little more sense of it for you here tonight. So basically, let me summarize it like this. If Eden has been restored, and we know that under the new covenant it is, and God created woman for man because it was not good for man to be alone, then marriage is commanded under the new covenant if Eden has been restored. So there you go. Sadly, there are a lot of people that don't think Eden has been restored, which is sad. I'm going to stop because it just makes me want to talk about it all the more. Okay, we'll talk to you next week. We'll get you a little bumper music going on here, and we'll just let this take us out. And love y'all. Just study your Bible, right? Show yourself approved diligently. Do so diligently. We'll see you next week. Jesus, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Spirit, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name, Spirit. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth.
In Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my life, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground. When through the fiercest drought and storm, what nights of love, what depths of
Hey guys,
peace.
I am going to I'm going to take a minute here and um, answer a question. I just saw this, and I think I can do this. I think I can do this relatively quick, maybe. So let me touch on this. This is for the bearded man adrenaline. Okay, um, I think maybe I'll touch on this now. I'll spend some more time on it next week, and I just don't want to let this go. So if you're still watching, bearded man adrenaline, I think that's a great name. Let me address this. Okay, so his question is. Then I'm gonna close this. I promise. His question is, what about Lazarus? I lost it. Can you explain Lazarus and the others that were raised from the dead by Jesus? Okay. Next week I'll show you a chart about the 6 people that were raised from the dead before Jesus. Jesus was the 7th one. Now, if you know anything about Bible numbers, then you know that the number 7 is the perfect number, right? It's completion, perfection, however you want to put this. So Jesus, being the 7th one raised, defeated the grave. He became the first fruits. Lazarus didn't do that. Lazarus, when he died, if he died before the return of the Lord, he would have been consigned back to Sheol or to Hades, however you want to look at it. The same with the other 5 before him. Okay, so yeah, just Lazarus and the others raised from the dead. So I'll show you a chart. I'll show you some of the passages, and we'll go through that next week. So I'll have to make a note of that, or I'll forget. So I think that'll be a great thing, and we'll answer that. Okay, so now I'm going to okay. I'm just looking at some of these questions here. Always misspelled question. That's typically me. They can't. That's why they don't answer. Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll just show you next week. No problem. Okay. All right. So that might be a little bit of a teaser, but either way, it's still a little bit of an answer. Okay. So now I'm going to find another song and see see what. Oh, here's a good one. Okay, we'll do this one. Okay, now we'll transition out of here, and we will see you all. We'll see you all next week.
Tis a fount of blood from the source of love, and He gives us all free drink. Lay down to the fountain free. Lay down, 'tis for you and me. Thirsty soul, hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a living stream where the crystal gleam from the throne of life now it flows.